Today, I'm going to be answering all of your questions. .18 miles, 9 minutes, 12 seconds per mile, 140 beats per minute today for my recovery run back in Eastern Iowa at my in-laws place. There is just some absolutely fantastic running here in Eastern Iowa. Lots of very nicely maintained dirt roads that are very nice to run in, and such beautiful rolling hills around here. So it's absolutely fantastic running terrain. I'm having such a good time. But today what I want to talk about is the questions that you guys have been asking me. I asked you guys to ask me anything on Instagram for the past couple of days, and here are the questions that you've asked. Now, I'm going to try and answer every single one. There might be some duplicates, that's okay, but I'm going to try to go over all of them in the order in which I received them. So here we go. Best marathon in 2019. I'm not a huge spectator of the sport of marathoning. I'm getting more into it now. It's more interesting. It's a fantastic time to be watching marathoning. I think that probably there's a recency effect to it. I think that Berlin was an amazing race. I also think that CIM this year was probably the most fun marathon to be at. Just like I didn't get to go. I've never been to CIM, but having so many people that were trying to hit the Olympic, or at least the American Olympic trial standard, just seeing some of the footage that was there and some of the energy that must have been there. And I know lots of people go there on an annual basis. It's definitely something that I have on my list for 2020 because it just seems like every year it just gets to be more and more exciting of a race to attend from both a participant and a spectator standpoint. I mean, you're not getting like global names at that event, but as far as American marathoning goes, it's pretty intense. So those are probably like my two choices for 2019. All right, any races for 2020? I've got a couple on the books already. I'll be running Houston in a couple of weeks. That's in January. And then in April, I'll be running Boston. And then later in the fall, I'll be running Chicago. I'm already signed up for that as well. I think I'll be running another Ragnar, at least one more Ragnar relay. I think we're going to do one in June. And then my running buddy and I are going to try to do something a little bit different, but it's a Ragnar relay. At some point, we got to get that on the books as well. So that's already like 5 events. What's a good time to taper for a first-time marathoner? Is there a too soon, a too late? I think that it can be too soon, you can be too late. I think it depends. Your body will kind of tell you when it's ready to taper. It might be hard to kind of figure that out if it is your first time. As you get near the taper, you're going to feel really, really beat up, really tired. I would say for the first time, start at about 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks to starting your taper. And then after that, you can kind of gauge from there. How did that make you feel? Next question, tell us more about your studies, university and college, and work life. In college, I studied biology. I went to Washington University in St. Louis. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't end up being a doctor. After that, I worked at the med school for several years as a researcher. I was a cell biologist by training to go with my biology education. And then several years later, I went to law school in Chicago. Would you consider running a form of medication? Have you ever cried during a run? I don't want to call it medication because I think that means something very specific, and I don't want to call it therapy either, but I do think it's very therapeutic. I think it could help a lot of people. I consider it more of a form of meditation. Although I think people who meditate would probably disagree with that label as well. That's kind of how I see it. I've definitely cried during a run. I've cried during many runs. I get very emotional sometimes during some longer or harder runs. It's just something that happens. Marathon training considers recovery seriously, yet you run 7 days a week. How about rest days? The way I see it is it's going to be different for everyone. I've come into it from right off of a marathon training block. So I was in very good physical shape already coming into it. I also feel like marathon has been really easy on my muscles. And so I haven't felt the need to take rest days. So the way that I've also been kind of mentally dealing with how slow it feels to run marathon is to just run a bunch of miles. And so make myself tired enough that I feel like, oh, this slower pace feels good rather than this slower pace feels frustrating because I'm fresh. So that's kind of how I've been approaching it. I don't really get the sense that I'm overtrained at the moment. I'm hoping that what it ultimately means is that I'm putting bunches of cumulative fatigue in my legs, so that way when I taper, all of a sudden all that weight is like lifted and I can fly. That's kind of the idea. What is the best treadmill you have been using? Easily the best ones are Woodway treadmills. They feel really nice underfoot. They're smooth. They ramp up and down speed quickly but smoothly. They're just fantastic to run in. But you know, pretty much any treadmill where you can get indoor miles in is a good treadmill by my account. All right, next question. Have you thought of what your shoe of the year is for a competition I did in 2019? Yeah, I already made that video like 7 months ago. It's the Vaporfly Next Percent. I BQ'd in it. I ran in it. All my marathons this year. It's a fantastic shoe. Will you come to Brazil? I'd love to. I don't see it happening anytime in the near future, but I'd love to go down there. Especially when it's winter up here. I want to go down to Brazil when it's summer. Which was the most durable shoes that you remember to had used? Probably something Asics. Those things are built like tanks and they last forever. I remember at one point being frustrated. This was years ago, maybe either in high school or in college, being frustrated at a pair of Asics that I had because I wanted to get a new pair of shoes, but I felt like it was wasteful to get a new pair of shoes before I wore out the old pair of shoes, and the Asics would just never wear out. They still are that way. What's the hardest part of marathon training? Time management. Your running journey has been inspiring. If you could do it all again, what would you do different? I would do kind of two things. I would be more consistent and I would worry less. I was always very worried about paces, mileage, am I doing everything right? But later on, I kind of started to figure out that it's about your overall consistency, your weekly mileage, at least for the marathon. I wish I'd figured that out sooner. I also wish that I'd figured that out sooner, that consistency is important when I was running very short distances, when I was running the 800, the 1600, running cross country, those kinds of events in high school. Are there any sports brands you avoid? Why? The only one that I would say I'm avoiding right now would be Nike, just because they've got some stuff going on. They've got to clean up their act a little bit. It doesn't feel great to put on the swoosh as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm just not going to force it since I don't have any obligation to or not to review any one particular brand. So I'm not avoiding it. It's just I don't feel not compelled. I don't feel a desire to review it. So that's where that is. Will there be new non-elite merch? Yes, I'm working with a designer right now, Greg Idhara, a local Chicago designer. He's been doing some great work. He's also been doing some fantastic customizations of gears like singlets, spikes, running shoes. Amazing work. We're gonna put together something awesome. He's already given me a design. He's given me exactly what I asked for. The problem is what I asked for, I don't love. I really like it, I don't love it. And when I love it, that's when we'll have some new merch. How does changing your shoes frequently affect the way you run? I don't think it affects me. I think it affects, maybe I just don't get affected as much by it. I think it only really affects the way I run in so much as that different shoes like to be run in different ways. And I think that if I'm pretty quick at figuring that out. If you don't figure that out, that feels like you're gonna feel like you're fighting the shoe. And so I don't like to fight the shoe. I like to try to figure out what the shoe is trying to tell me to do. And so it ends up making me run a little bit differently for different runs. But you know, that's okay. Running my first half marathon on the 5th of January. Any tips on how to pace myself to finish at my target pace? I would say plan for a negative split. Plan for going a little bit slower than your target pace for the first half. And then for the second half, plan to go a little bit faster than your target pace. That's one way to do it. Or plan to go at your target pace for at least the first half and then reevaluate to see if you can either maintain that pace or go faster for the second half, but do not go faster than your target pace for the first half. How do I run as much as you without getting injured? You're a 25 to 30 mile per week runner. Consistency, increase the number of days you're running per week, increase the number of mileage you're running per week, but do it very, very gradually. Increasing mileage is about running in the long haul, not about getting from 25 to 60 miles in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So you want to do that over weeks and weeks. Were you able to consistently run and train when your kids were newborn? Looking for advice? No. I don't even think I was running when my first daughter was born. I had taken a long break. I ran a marathon with my dad in 2010, and I didn't really pick it up again until 2015 or so. And so my first daughter was born in that middle area. The second daughter was born at that time, as well as I was picking up running again. When the kids are newborn, the way I see it, me and my running buddy, we both have kids, and a lot of our friends have kids. And so it's like whenever someone has a kid, they go into like newborn hibernation for like 30 to 60 days. You just don't see them. They're not going to be doing a lot. You got way bigger priorities to take care of, and sleep is your main priority. Running becomes like a third priority. So I wasn't able to be all that consistent, but I think I would treat, if you're trying to be consistent during running, I would say get in the runs whatever you can when you can, kind of like sleep. Sleep when you can, whatever you can, around the baby schedule. What's the best way to run in the cold? How to get a good warm-up, staying warm, etc. I would say for me, it's I go overboard on the areas that I get coldest. So I'm always wearing extra thick mittens. I'm always wearing or running with hand warmers, even if it's really not that cold out. That's one of the things I do. The other thing that I do is for the rest of my body that is like normal in terms of how it deals with the cold, I will be a little bit chilly for when I start the run. That way I'm not too sweaty. If you get really, really sweaty during a run, it makes all your clothes really heavy and uncomfortable, and it could even end up freezing or making any wind that hits you like cool you down because they're wet. So you don't want to sweat when you're on a winter run. But if you have certain key areas that are more susceptible to cold, like for me, my hands, make sure those are extra warm. Any plans to join the Singapore Marathon for the coming future? I would love to. I'd love to run marathons all over the world. I don't see it. The budget isn't quite there for it yet. We'll see as the channel grows if I have the time and budget to be able to do that. But that would be amazing. Are you going to have any Chicago running meetups again in the future? Yes, a couple of people have been mentioning it about when we're going to do like a Kofuzi Run Club in Chicago. And I know I kind of give the Chicago people like short shrift because when I travel somewhere, I always invite people to come and run. But I think I'm going to try and do something like more regularly, like a second Sundays of the month kind of thing, where on a recovery run, we all can just kind of, whoever wants to get together can get together. Can you do a tour of my shoe closet? My shoe closet is tiny. We have a 1,000 square foot apartment, 2-bedroom, 2-bath for 2 people, 2 adults and 2 kids and a dog. So there's just not a lot of space. That's why I donate shoes really frequently. For a lot of shoes, once I get to the 100-mile mark, I donate them to charity because I just don't have room to store shoes. Have you qualified for Boston? If so, what was your time and how do others qualify? You qualify based on time for your age group. I did qualify for Boston last year at the Tunnel Marathon. My time was 3:01:53. I needed a 3:10, so I was able to get that with plenty of room to spare, which was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting that. How do others get there? Run consistently, run a little bit more mileage than you have, run a couple more days per week than you have, and keep doing that. And then eventually you'll qualify. When choosing a marathon training plan, what are some key things you consider? I think philosophy is the main thing that I consider. Is this a training plan for fast people, short twitch muscles, or is this a training plan for not fast people, like regular human beings? Like, is this a training plan that's going to work for someone that ran like D2 or D1 in college, regardless of the distance? Or is this a plan that's going to work for like people that weren't collegiate track athletes. That's the main thing that I look for. In that second category, what I look for is, do they value cumulative fatigue or specific workouts? I like cumulative fatigue, like back-to-back long runs, lots of things where you're simulating the fatigue of marathon fatigue in a race. I need lots of miles, lots of days of running per week, lots of back-to-back big running days. So that's kind of what I look for. You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself. It'll take a couple marathon training plans of trial and error for you to figure out what really works for you. If you don't know, if you're looking for a marathon training plan, I would say start out with Hal Higdon. He has a lot of free training plans. He's been training people to run marathons on the internet for forever, but he's a really good place to start, and then you can kind of go from there depending on what works for you. How do you balance the time and effort of marathon training, vlogs, raising a family, and work? I don't really sleep that much, and I try to time shift everything that I can to times that my family won't be impacted. So right now it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and during the holiday week, everyone's still sleeping and I'm in the bathroom. And then I'm gonna start running at like 5:30 in the morning. It'll be dark for 2 out of the 3 hours of my run coming up today. And then hopefully I'll be back as the girls are like starting to wake up and eat breakfast. So that's kind of how I do that. So film really, really early in the morning, edit videos really, really early in the morning, run really, really early in the morning, and then be back and ready to start the day when everyone else is. So that's like the main thing that I try to do. It makes me not all that useful at night. I'm figuring that part out still. Any advice for new runners? Run today with the knowledge that you're gonna have to run, or that you will get to run tomorrow. So it doesn't matter if you had a really hard workout Tuesday, if it means it was so hard that you can't run Wednesday. So that's kind of how I see it. Consistency is the key. Also, could you please make a video about how to choose shoes? The way that I choose shoes is from an overall perspective of like, what am I gonna wear today, is I choose a shoe for the type of run I'm gonna have. Is it gonna be a long, easy run, a long, fast run, a short, fast run, recovery run, that kind of thing. Different shoes for different tasks, like different knives for different types of cooking that I'm gonna do. Chef's knife, boning knife, paring knife, that kind of thing. In terms of how to buy a shoe, I think of it from what do I need in my closet. I think that when you begin, all you need is the daily trainer, a kind of an all-around shoe that could do a little bit of everything. Then from there, you might want a little bit of a faster shoe, something to race in. Then after that, you might want to also then add in something that can soak up a little bit more mileage, maybe run a little bit slower, but a little bit more comfortable for you to run in for longer miles. So you could start adding in and building up that rotation. I just wonder, how do you feel about Nike after some time off? I mean, the sting is gone, like the sting of disappointment is gone about it, but they haven't made any substantial changes since the time that I made my video. I'm waiting. January is when the CEO steps down, the new one comes in. We'll see if there's any other changes that happen. I've been watching very closely Shalane Flanagan's Instagram account to see what she's been doing. I've been watching very closely Jordan Hassay's Instagram account. She seems to be very happy and doing a lot more running, which looks good. I've been watching a lot of the athletes to see what kinds of changes, watching a lot of the Nike accounts to see what kinds of changes are going to be announced. Still waiting for the results of that investigation that Nike promised. I haven't heard anything about it. If you guys have, let me know. Are you interested in completing the Marathon Major Series? I am. It's hard though. It's hard to get into these things. It's expensive to get into these things on the international level. And so that's what makes it more difficult. I mean, I'd love to run Berlin. That just seems like it'd be amazing. I'd love to run any race in Tokyo. That seems amazing as well. I'd love to run in London, just to be around so many spectators from one of the run craziest countries in the world. I think that would be amazing. So I'd love to do it, but it's not like an outright goal that I have. I'm not like planning, I'm not mapping out the years for it. If I had to pick one shoe to run in for the rest of my life, what would it be? Probably a Pegasus. How big, where are you, and how much do you weigh now? I think I understand the question. Before I kind of picked up my running journey again, like 2015 or so, I was at about 180 pounds. I'm 5'10", and now I'm still 5'10", but I'm about 140. Have you ever dabbled in more minimal style running shoes or plan to, zero drop? I mean, I ran in the Carbon Rocket. That's a 1mm drop shoe, but I don't think that's what you mean. I feel great in the running shoes that I run in. I'm able to log a lot of miles and I don't pick up injuries frequently, knock on wood. I'm relatively resilient. So I feel like if I had other problems, then I definitely would look that way. But for me, I don't have a plan to. I don't have a plan not to either. So, like someone asked me once about ultra shoes. I want to try ultra shoes. They're just so weird. Have I ever done an ultra marathon? I have not, but it's something that I eventually will want to do. I think I want to break 3 hours first, then we'll look at ultras. Favorite food? Shinramen. If I had to choose one shoe to run in for the rest of my life, what would it be? I answered that already, Pegasus. Can I speak Korean? A little bit. I can understand a little bit more, but it's been a long time since I've been really fluent. How did I end up in Chicago? I was dating my wife in St. Louis at the time. She was a 100% travel consultant on a long-term project in St. Louis. That project was ending and she didn't know where she was going to be shipped out to for her next project. Her home base was Chicago, and so I felt like it was a really great time for me to move to Chicago. What heart rate monitors am I using at the moment? Right now I'm using the Polar OH1 Plus. That one, I love that thing. What do you attribute your marathon speed to? Mileage. I run a lot of miles. I think that's where my speed comes from. Not that I'm that speedy, but I think to the extent that I have speed, just a lot of consistent miles. Ever heard of supplementing beetroot juice into your diet before a race? I've heard of people trying to incorporate more of it into their diet regularly. I haven't heard about it specifically like before a race. Like I've heard of people taking like bicarb before a race, but I also heard that when you do that the right way, it ends up with the high likelihood of explosive diarrhea as well. That's not beetroot juice. That's sodium bicarb, baking soda. Anyway, have you ever had any issues with cramping during the later miles of a marathon? Yeah, I think everyone has a little bit. It's kind of hard to discern when everything kind of feels like it's starting to fall apart. What's a cramp and what's like muscle fatigue and what's actual like muscle damage. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. But I'm sure I have, but usually muscle cramping. Well, I've had it in the summer training. I definitely had a lot of cramping because I wasn't getting enough fluid. So I had that in the back of my calves. So I definitely had that. But during a marathon, usually it's more like the muscles just stop working. What's the story behind Kofuzi? Kofuzi is a play on Confucius. So Confucius is the anglicization of Kongfutsu. Kong was his last name. Futsu is master teacher. That's my understanding of the Chinese. So Kong, last name, master teacher, Futsu. That turned into Confucius in English. So I'm going to take that back from I would say the bastardization of that word and turn it into Ko, that's my last name, Fucius, like Fuzi. So that's more a little bit like Futsu, so it's kind of a full circle. I was taking an East Asian studies in college at the time when I made up that name. So that's an old name. It's been around for decades. When are you going to try the Skechers Maxpro? I'm not sure what that shoe is, but definitely am open to more Skechers. What's your best advice on training for a spring marathon? Run a lot of winter miles. Now that you have gone the coach route via Edge, what are your feelings on going alone? I've learned a ton about what my body is great at, what my body is not great at, what my strengths are, and what my weaknesses are. I feel much more confident in going at it alone now. But I also have learned a lot of being coached. And I'm not very good at being coached. It's something that it's been a problem for me throughout my career. I learned a lot about myself during that process. So if I do get coached again, I think I could be a better coachee. I wasn't a very good coachee, I think. I could have done that better. Favorite running shoe? Pegasus. Will you consider a trail ultra in the future? Definitely. If I do run an ultra, it's going to be a trail ultra. When I ran the tunnel marathon, my friend that I ran out there with, who lives out in the Seattle area, he was telling me how much he likes that tunnel. He'd run it a couple times before. Telling me how much he likes that event because it's like a trail race. And I was like, what's the difference? He goes, you'll see. The atmosphere, the energy, very different. And it was super fun. Trail ultras, trail races, definitely see more of those in my future because the vibe is just fantastic. All right, main learnings to achieve BQ, be consistent. Favorite shoe, Pegasus. What's your next goal once you break 3 hours, an ultra or 250? There's two really just giant goals. An ultra is probably the next like immediate goal after I break 3. Then after that, like there will be an ultimate time goal there. And I think whatever it is, like a 20-minute 5K pace for a marathon is like the ultimate goal. I don't know if I'll ever get there. That's just insane, but we'll see. How does sleep deprivation affect your training? Sleep is the main way you recover. Recovering is the main way you get strong. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not getting strong. That's how it affects your training. Best all-around shoe for the year. I'll talk about that more. I have a best top 5 shoes of 2019. Although best shoe, I've already done that video, Vaporfly next. But best all-around shoe, it's kind of like pigeonholing it a little bit, but it'll be a daily trainer. Why do I run so much? Because I love it. What inspired you to start running? At what age did you begin long distance running? So my first marathon I ran with my dad. I was 30, he was 60, and he said he was going to run the Baltimore Marathon, so I thought I'd join him. Any advice on how to get through the cold runs in during the cold Chicago winters? Bundle up and just go. You'll get used to it. Or hit the treadmill. Either one is great. What's the favorite piece of gear I've reviewed? I think the favorite thing that I've ever reviewed was I had like this GoPro like slingshot kind of thing where I just spun it around and around and around. That thing was super weird, impossible to run with. I gave it a good shot, but that thing was super weird. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien, thank you. Before your HR training, how do you schedule your tempo, interval, recovery, and long runs? When I did it myself, well, the last training plan that I did, my coach planned all those things out for me. It was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. When I would do it, I would usually do like Saturday long run and then one hard workout during the week. And everything else was pretty much easy/recovery runs. Although I wasn't always good. I was good at recovery runs. I would do a recovery run on Sunday. Everything else was kind of a little bit too fast for an easy day. So I wasn't doing that all that well. But that's pretty much how I did it. So basically kind of, if I'm doing 2 hard workouts a week, then I would set them at like opposite ends, as like try to put 3 days in between them. If I'm doing 3, then you try to do it like every other day, like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Have I tried Hoka sandals? I have not, but I have tried UFO sandals. I love them. My wife also has a pair of her own because she kept stealing mine and I got annoyed. But she has her own. She loves them as well. Those are amazing. And then there's just a runner emoji. Is Stride worth the $200 price? I would say it is if you're getting everything out of it that it can provide. Like I'm not training with Power right now, so it seems like a very expensive foot pod. On the other hand, I'm not running with a Garmin right now, and so the Garmin foot pod requires a Garmin watch, or at least a watch that has Ant Plus. Polar doesn't. So it's really the only way that I can get pace and distance from a foot pod and not have to worry about what watch am I pairing it with it. Maybe there's other options out there, but as far as I know, that's the only one. So for me, it is, especially because GPS is not that reliable for pace and distance data. Anyone that's run the Chicago Marathon, you know. Anyone else that runs in an urban area, you know. The skyscrapers just mess everything up. 50 kilometers on February. Most I can do right now is 8 kilometers and can only train 3 times a week. Is that enough time? Maybe. It's not going to be pretty by the time you finish. The main thing that you're going to worry about is getting injured. So you want to make sure you're getting lots of rest. And if you're only running 3 times a week, those have got to be quality runs. I would focus on making them really, really long runs if you can. Most of the time when people say quality, they mean run fast. I think for you, I'd rather have you spend a lot of time on feet for those 3 times a week if you can do that. There is a book out there called like Run Less, Run Faster or something like that. That's really good for a certain type of runner. I'm not that type of runner. Maybe you are. I would look at that maybe, but that focuses on a lot of speed work. So maybe not the best. I would say right now, if you're only running 8K a week, you got to really bump up that mileage. And I wouldn't say do it quickly, but I would say probably do it faster than most people recommend, like don't increase more than 10% a week. You might need to do a little bit more than that because you're running out of time. Can you share more insight to your sleep, to your recovery, sleep time, diet, rolling, etc.? My diet's pretty horrible. I made a video about that. It's been cleaned up quite a bit since then because I feel better when I eat better. I don't do a lot of rolling. I might do some rolling like after a race, but otherwise I don't regularly roll. Sleep, I try to get as much sleep as I can, but I don't really sleep all that much. Sleep, I think, is the most important thing that you can do for recovery, more than any of the other stretching, rolling, rubbing, taping, icing. I don't really like ice baths. When is my next race? January 19th. How did you first get into running? Why do you run? I first got into running in 6th or 7th grade. 7th grade, I think. So that would have been like 11 years old. That's when I started running. Why did I? At that time, the reason I ran is because it was a team that I could get on that didn't have any cuts. Everything else that I tried out for didn't want me. Running always wanted me. Why do I run now? Because it's awesome. It makes me feel great. What's my standpoint on Nike right now? Right now, I'm waiting to see what they're going to do to make any changes. What do you think of Hansons marathon training program? I'm not all that familiar with Hansons method of training, but I do think that it aligns a lot with what I kind of like, which is lots of mileage, lots of building on cumulative fatigue. So I think that I haven't looked at a plan very closely, but I think we're all kind of talking about the same thing. Where can you find training plans for all levels of runners? If you want free ones, go to Hal Higdon. He's a great resource. This emoji, I don't know what that is, but that's cool. AfterShots, Aeropex. I've tried AfterShots before. I don't like them. I can't run in a winter hat with them, and I just feel like it's like running with a really small speaker near me. I don't get the bone conduction quite right, no matter how I try to push it. I just feel like I'm just listening to a speaker that's really small and close to my ear anyway. So I'm not a huge fan. Other people love them, and I think that's great. Has your nutrition changed at all with low heart rate training and increased mileage? How? It hasn't really changed all that much. I've been gradually changing it from the last marathon training plan to make sure I'm getting enough protein, to make sure I'm getting enough fiber, to make sure I'm drinking enough fluids. And so that's what I've been carried over. I haven't really changed it so much in this training style. Am I running Chicago 2020? Yes. What's my favorite carbon fiber plated shoe? Probably Vaporfly next, then Vaporfly 4%, then Carbon Rocket, then Carbon X. 2020 is going to be interesting because there's going to be a whole bunch more entrants. What do you do when you get tired of your route? Run a different route, or run it backwards, or run somewhere else entirely if you can. What do you think about the relationship with Rey and Kylo Ren? I think it's weird. I haven't seen the last movie yet, but from the last couple of movies, it's strange. No one else has relationships like that in the entire Star Wars galaxy. In all of the other Jedis, no one else is like that. So I don't understand. I get it. As the Force concentrates, as fewer people are practitioners, it gets more powerful and weird things happen. I kind of get that concept, but it's still weird. Anyway, have you ever taken a break from running? And if so, did it benefit you or not? Since I've started running year round, which was like 3 years ago, I haven't really taken breaks. Sometimes I'll run less mileage because it's hard to run a lot of miles in the winter, but I haven't taken breaks. I've always been concerned that if I took more than like a 3-day break, that I would fall out of the habit of running. I don't think that would happen to me now, but that's always been my concern. So I just feel like I've got a good habit going. I want to keep it going. I don't have to run a ton, but I want to make sure I keep running. What was your favorite race this year? What race are you looking forward to next year? My favorite race was obviously the Tunnel Marathon for me because I BQ'd there, but it's also just like an amusement park for marathon runners. It's just so much downhill, so many beautiful views, so many great people, just such a fun race. The race that I'm looking forward to next year is Boston. It'll be my first time going, and I can't wait to see the pandemonium. Have you ever experienced runner's high? If yes, how often? I'm not sure. I don't think I get runner's high. I don't think I've ever felt that. I've felt flow before, where running just feels effortless. I've gotten that. I've definitely, maybe like what when most people would experience runner's high, I'm feeling like that's when I'm like crying when I'm running. Maybe that's what it is, but I don't think I've ever felt like runner's high. Gel Nemus 20 or 22, which one do you recommend for running training gym? I haven't tried the 20, so I'd go with the 22. What's the most bizarre, funny thing that's happened on one of your runs? I mean, there's been a lot of stuff like weird things that I've kind of like seen on a run.
Yo, what's going on?